Tomb Raider, The Angel of Darkness, adapted from the novelization by J.R. Millward, based on an original story by A. Murty Schofield. With J.R. Millward and Adam Coover. With music by Peter Connolly and Martin Iverson. Episode 8.
The tomb was flooding. I'd survived Brother Obscura's vengeful spirit and made it past a troop of undead guardians. I was alive, and I had the painting. And now the freaking tomb was flooding. Without a moment's hesitation, I slipped the painting into the relative safety of my backpack. I was only just in time. Instinctively, I fought against the current, only to be battered and tossed about like a cork in a river. My ears rang, but I had enough presence of mind to tuck my arms around my head. If I got knocked out now, it would be game over. A brilliance lit up behind my eyelids, and I blinked through the chaos to find the bridge lanterns winking bravely as they resisted the ever-increasing pressure. I was back in the entrance chasm. With the lantern light to guide me, I kicked upwards, my lungs aching harder with every stroke. Bubbles thrilled past me like silvery fish. Those final 12 seconds might as well have been a decade, but just as my ears began popping, I breached the surface. For long moments, I let myself float as the water continued to creep up the sides of the cavern. Maybe one day, the Louvre archaeologists would find their way down here and go diving for the buried treasures of the hall, never realizing that the main prize had already been taken. Perhaps they would be lucky enough to find the drowned remains of the Lux Veritatis' guardians, although part of me doubted that even this amount of water would faze the skeleton's undead dedication to duty. I wondered if, by removing the painting, I had unwittingly removed the one thing perpetuating their existence, and that the vitality that had animated those faithful bones was already being washed away. The ink-dark water finally stabilized near the top of the cavern. I sculled until my feet touched stone, and I recognized the oak beams that had forestalled my fall. The harsh glare of electric lights hurt for a moment, until my eyes adjusted to the change. My ever-reliable and mercifully waterproof watch said a little past 2 in the morning. I'd been in the tomb for almost 3 hours. The guards' unconscious bodies were gone. But no alarms blared, and no one was waiting for me with handcuffs and a police escort. My awareness sank deeper, my movements slowing to a deliberate, watchful gait. Apart from the soft whir of air conditioning, the place was silent and deserted. It worried me a lot. My unconscious registered the change even more profoundly, at an almost painful level. The painting in my backpack sagged as though gaining a metaphysical weight. I waited a long time, listening for danger, before I eased open the basement doors. In one fluid motion, I cocked my guns, foregoing the shock rounds or tranquilizer darts. Maggie's approval was a reassuring thing, The signs of trouble were all there, and I was not about to defend my life with nothing but a guilty conscience. What's your next move? We follow Werner's lead. We go back upstairs, get to Carvier's X-ray facilities, and find out just what the hell this painting is hiding. I met my first problem at the top of the stairs, confirming my worst fears. The roving light from his rifle-mounted torch was my only warning he was there at all, and I quickly flattened myself against the wall before he spotted me. The man was dressed in the kind of apparel you only ever see in the top echelons of military-grade outfitters, complete with infrared goggles, webbing belts, and a respirator. He sported no badges, no identifying features. Even official SWAT teams would at least have had their names sewn on their lapels. Why did it have to be mercenaries? Men like him were the bane of my archaeological career. Men who sold their services, whether amateur or professional, and cared for nothing beyond their own necks and the next shipment of cash. It was bad enough when I encountered them from time to time in the field, where they were normally to be found in the pay of an upstart rival. A reputation like mine tends to attract bodyguards, hired guns, and outright thugs into my co-workers' employment. I can't imagine why anyone would be so paranoid. I'm an okay girl when you get to know me. On the other hand, mercenaries belonged in the Louvre as much as a Cape buffalo with jock itch belonged in a nursery playgroup. Such things just couldn't be allowed. I pounced as his back was turned. He reacted with trained reflexes, whipping around to bring his weapon to bear. I didn't let him complete the move, but snarled and jabbed with stiffened fingers. His Kevlar vest was no protection against a strike to the throat, and he collapsed, gasping, his windpipe crushed. I pulled him into a darkened corner and held the pressure till his spasms ceased. Any qualms I might have had about using mortal force were quashed by the specs of his weapons, not least the short-barreled semi-automatic rifle dangling from his shoulder. He wasn't some budget muscle for hire, but a trained soldier. The notion did not add to my sense of well-being. With great care, I took the complaints of my muscles, the 101 aches and pains that had been bothering me, and locked them away into a secure compartment within my mind. Such things could be dealt with later. Right now, I had bigger problems to worry about. Only then did I smell the faint whiff of gas. That first, almost imperceptible breath almost made me pass out. Numbly, I unbuckled the dead man's respirator and clamped it to my mouth. Through the underwater blurriness of its visor, I watched the room turn steadily green as the gas cloud expanded. It reminded me of pond scum or diseased flesh. I was running out of time. Like a ghost, I slipped back through the galleries, avoiding two more guards in the forest of pillars and shadows. I felt like a ghost, too. Insubstantial, but sustained by willpower stronger than mere physical flesh. Several Louvre security officers lay where they had fallen, limbs thrust out awkwardly. I couldn't tell if any was still breathing. My security pass still worked, thank the gods. Making doubly sure I was alone, I slid into the office marked X-ray and spectral imaging. Silver moonlight shone through the skylights, bathing the room in appropriately wraith-like shadows. Even through the protection of my respirator, my eyes began watering at the smell of acetone. I crept past priceless oil paintings, denuded of their frames, and neat trays of restoration equipment through a sliding door of toughened radiation-proof glass into an adjoining room. The X-ray machine was only a little bigger than a photocopier, designed for examining paintings rather than medical patients. Fortunately, its controls were intuitive and relatively simple. My 4-year retraining as a radiographer could be put on hold. Casting a glance over my shoulder, I slipped my precious find into the scanner and pushed a few likely-looking buttons. That device. We've seen it before, haven't we? Yes. In Werner's notebook and Carvier's office. With great care, I leafed through the pages of my dead friend's journal, finally finding what I was looking for. And there it was. Not quite believing my eyes, I held the journal against the screen, comparing Werner's sketches to the flickering digital image. The machine can't identify the material except that it's definitely a metallic compound. The painting also contains 2 pictures, one on top of the other. Brother Obscura did paint over the original image, just as Carvier's notes said. The implications were enormous. Too much for my overburdened brain to process all at once. The myths and all of the research my friend had died for were true. I was holding a piece of the Sandglyph. This is what those mercenaries are after. They're hunting the paintings, hunting for the Sandglyph. Werner suspected, but was too scared to step in and go after it himself. Well, if this piece of the puzzle is true, then there will be others. 4 engravings, 4 paintings, 4 more pieces of the Sandglyph. Vasily faxed all but one of the engravings to Von Croy. They'll provide the locations for the other paintings. Locations those mercenaries will kill to possess. Well, it's obvious. We've got to find them before anyone else does. We've got to get back to Werner's apartment and find those engravings. Now. Instantly, my mind became clearer. The mystery had deepened, but I knew what the next step must be. My gut instinct was utterly certain. There, in the place where my friend had died, I would find the answers. Gingerly, I removed the painting from the scanner. Every brushstroke was as fresh as the day it had been applied, showing a chorus of red-robed angels descending on a pastoral scene, with the golden light of God in heaven at their backs, as though he were urging them down onto the world below. I ran my finger lightly across the painted surface, knowing that some other image lurked beneath the veneer of oils. Something substantially less devout in its subject matter, no doubt. With a shiver, I realized I could even feel the uneven bumps where the Sandglyph fragment was buried, hidden by its micrometer-thin coating of paint. I hoped I was imagining my fingers tingling at the contact, as though I were holding a cable carrying lethal current, with nothing but a pair of rubber gloves for protection. I slipped the thing back into my backpack, suppressing a shudder. Whatever the Sandglyph was to be used for, my instincts told me it couldn't be for anything good.
Někdo tu je!
I had already ducked at the first syllable, deafened by a catastrophe of breaking glass, and hit the deck as fragments fell like hail. Incensed at being caught out, I glared through the tangle of table legs and fired at the first set of kneecaps that came into view. The semi-automatic in my hands barked with barely any recoil, but not loudly enough to cover the screams. Using the brief window of opportunity, I broke cover, planting bullets with conservative care until the 2 mercenaries lay unmoving. Blood, blackened in the moonlight, bubbled from deep wounds. They'd died quickly, at least. My time in the Louvre had just run out. Turning away in disgust, I dashed back down the moonlit hallway and practically flew down the metal stairs back to Gallery 3. The poison gas was thicker here, muffling everything in a sickly green haze. A tickle in my throat grew too insistent to ignore, and I coughed. The sound attracted the attention of 2 more mercenaries who were creeping through the foyer. They didn't pause to identify the source. They just turned and opened fire, yelling into their microphones. I can't dodge bullets, but I can close the distance on people who don't take those critical moments needed to properly aim at their targets. Ricochets whistled through my hair as I responded with short bursts from my own gun, downing one and swinging the rifle's heavy stock to clobber the other. His face mask cracked, and instantly he went down on his knees, clawing feebly at his mouth. Onwards I ran, past promotional posters and signs directing people to the restrooms. Hallways and rare artworks went past in a blur. I couldn't help but be uncomfortably aware that I was leaving a trail of conspicuous evidence that the invaders couldn't ignore. As I ran through an exhibition hall, a tingling of premonition thrilled through me and was rewarded when the glass ceiling disintegrated. Fist-sized holes appeared in the floor, tracing my dash for cover. Furiously, I sighted on the soldiers just as their absar lines reached the ground. A stray bullet pinged against a cabinet. A superb Islamic blue bowl teetered and then smashed onto the floor in a shower of ceramic dust. 12th century Syria. You bastards. I plucked extra rounds from the bodies and fled, leaving them dangling pathetically in midair. With more force than was strictly necessary, I reloaded, my fury souring with distaste. Whoever these mercenaries were, they had absolutely no appreciation for culture. As I jogged along, another fact nagged at the back of my mind. Whoever was behind this invasion wielded more than a little temporal power. Mercenaries infiltrating the Louvre, especially ones as well equipped and trained as these guys, would not come cheap. Passing squads forced me to seek the cover of shadows, and I slipped away in the opposite direction, down a stairwell into Gallery 2. Although the gas seemed to be dissipating, the Louvre's corridors seemed to go on forever. Where was the exit? The air was definitely cleaner down here. With relief, I slipped off my mask, letting it dangle within easy reach, and paused at the entrance to Gallery 2. It seemed to buck the trend from the others I had visited, being low-ceilinged and lit only by the long display cases that divided its length. Some impressive examples of Egyptian and Greek vases obscured my view across the room, and I slowed, listening out for danger. There was hardly any chance to register the threat. It blew past, making a sound like the whetting of a Damascus steel blade. A golden blur of eye-searing intensity, turning my evasion into an awkward spin. In moments, my gun was out, and my eyes widened. It was a discus, its bladed edge shining like the glint in the eye of an angel. And it was buried almost completely in the solid marble wall. I tensed, knowing it had missed me by inches, knowing that it had changed direction as it flew. In silence, I snapped a fresh round into my purloined machine gun, scanning the room. Nothing else seemed to be poised to attack me. But caution made me hesitate. Very slowly, I began backing up the way I had come. Something cold pressed into my back, and I stopped dead. Of course. How could I have been so careless? In the hullabaloo of finding the painting and avoiding hired guns, I'd completely forgotten about my stalker. He must have been waiting for me all this time. I almost asked if I might be permitted to walk over and bang my head against the wall, but I couldn't imagine him taking such a request in good humour. Don't kick yourself too much. I didn't even notice he was there. Whoever he is good. He was also far, far too close for comfort. When the hero or heroine is threatened with a gun in the movies, they always seem to have a clever little trick to escape their assailant. The editor and director will work their magic, and in a few well-cut camera shots, you'll see the hero pull free, knee their attacker in the groin, and generally end up holding the gun, jumping on a horse, and riding off into the sunset. Yeah, right. That stuff only works in the movies, I'm afraid. As any sane person will tell you, when a man is holding a gun's muzzle against your carotid artery, the only sensible thing to do is freeze. Any threatening move on my part wouldn't leave me chance to blink, let alone gain the advantage. Even though I knew it was the logical and prudent thing to do, I was not in the least bit calm. I was bloody furious. The man's free hand clenched my shoulder, drawing me to him. His unique scent filled my world. Sour male sweat, cheap tobacco, and the faintest trace of diesel fumes from his motorbike. There was something oddly provocative about the combination. For a crazy moment, I remembered how good-looking he was. But then his hand was sliding lower, past my elbow, down to my wrist. More gently than taking a gift from a lover's hands, he eased the dangling gun from my grasp and let it clatter to the floor. My pulse rose, beating in a furious lump that couldn't be swallowed. My indignation threatened to boil over as I felt that same hand slide across the plane of my stomach down to my thigh. His questing hand found my pistol still in its holster and pulled it free, disarming me. A slight pull on my shoulder straps, the sound of my backpack being opened, and I knew by the changing weight that he'd taken the painting. Any thoughts about his looks or his skills evaporated in the white heat of my outrage. He'd stolen my painting. Enough was enough. If ever there was a time for movies to imitate real life, this was it. In the microsecond it took for the man to slip the loot into his pocket, I attacked. It was a simple judo throw, brutal and no nonsense. My leg wrapped around his and wrenched to knock him off balance. It should have worked. I'm still not sure how it didn't. Miraculously free of bullet holes, I beheld his face. Somehow he'd reversed my throw and now stood facing me, tilting my chin up with the pistol so that our eyes were on a level. For an instant, I felt the pressure of cold metal increase. Its message was clear. Don't try that again. But his expression took me off guard. He wasn't angry or surprised. He was amused. The corner of his lip lifted in an engaging half smile. He was still wearing the same clothes as I'd seen him in earlier, with his dark hair falling rakishly out of place. His eyes were the colour of Egyptian lapis. Give me walking corpses and whirling bladed death traps. Give me howling blizzards and muddy assault courses. Give me thirst and heat and chafed skin. Give me anything, I would have said, except for someone who can beat me and make me look like a fool. This man, this thief, had done just that. With style. It was humiliating. It was also... Damn, how could I be even thinking the word? Sexy. I was shocked. More than that, I was impressed. Many people, most of them male, have tried to challenge me over the years, intellectually, physically, or philosophically. You can go and visit them if you like, if you don't mind venturing into bottomless chasms or the stomachs of wild beasts. None of them had ever succeeded. With a jolt, I realised I was contemplating the attractiveness of a man who might have murdered my friend. His head tilted, questioningly, the gun not leaving my neck. And with a supreme effort, I forced myself to relax and to feel as Horus had taught me. Maggie's gentle strength bathed my perception as I focused my untested skill. I detected resolution and competency completely at odds with his easygoing appearance. Despite his threatening attitude, there was no trace of the corruption I'd sensed in the man leaving Wren's pawnshop. The blue-eyed gaze, holding on to mine, had witnessed the pollution and violence, but carried none of the monstrum's malice. He wasn't the killer I was after. That didn't mean I was willing to trust him, though. The moment passed. He was backing away, putting distance between us, his weapon trained on my heart. I felt empty, deflated, and not simply from being unarmed. Something vital and alive was withdrawing, leaving me cold. To my shock, the discus thing began to thrum and glowed with radiance once more. I could only watch, mesmerised, as it detached itself from the wall and swirled around me, sparkling like a deadly, priceless jewel, or a dog circling a stranger, unsure whether I was friend or foe. The doggy analogy held true as it suddenly flicked away and soared across the room, straight to the man's outstretched hand as though returning to a beloved master. It fitted his fist like a glove, its blades retracted, becoming a simple golden disc. Its gleam was mirrored in the man's eyes as he noted my fascination. And then he winked, turned, and ran for it. I only hesitated for a second, but a second was an age too long. The hypnotic power that held me snapped like a rubber band, and I was running for all my worth. I couldn't let him escape with the painting. It was only when the pounding of my feet was overruled by a louder, sharper noise that I realised what was happening. Someone was shooting at me, and I'd left my guns behind. I blew past the display cases, the air becoming deadly with flying splinters. In a suicidal instant, I glanced back long enough to register the gunman. It was a mercenary, almost hidden behind the flash of his submachine gun's muzzle. Beside him loomed a Goliath in uniform, his chiseled head shaved to the quick and eyes fixed on my retreating back. My heart shriveled up in sudden fear. Nothing that adamant in its cruelty belonged in a human's body. In seconds, I had left them behind. My still damp boots skidded on polished tiles as I entered a columned hallway, the fleeting shadow of my quarry disappearing around a corner. To my horror, the hallway's exit was blocked by a security gate. The thief clearly registered its presence too, as he darted sideways from behind the protective cover of the columns. There's no way out! The thought had barely formed in my head when a terrific report made my eardrums rattle. Incredulously, I watched the thief lower his hand and dash for the place where a locked door had once stood, but which now lay in matchwood ruin in its frame. A blur of gleaming radiance raced through the air in his wake, and the connection was made. Telekinesis. A human with telekinetic ability. The very idea made my jaw drop, or would have done so had I not been sprinting full pelt in pursuit. With preternatural grace, he evaded my grasp, and the discus swept backwards in an arc that almost decapitated me. A resonant note, like the peal of a giant church bell, made my teeth clang as the discus sliced through the chains holding up a giant Tibetan gong. I ducked and rolled, using my forward momentum to regain my feet, and froze, paralysed by the visceral weapon that was suddenly levelled at my throat. My gaze travelled up the stranger's arm to that knowing smile. Me, impressed at being bested for the second time in one night? Surely not. With the inevitability of an avalanche, the gong began to roll. A vast wheel, turning slowly to block off the exit. The exit! The stranger nodded with mock courtesy, withdrew the discus and backed out through the open doorway. He was fast, but I was desperate. I just managed to squeeze through as the bronze gong closed the gap, almost crushing me. The mercenary who tried to follow in my wake wasn't so lucky. I whipped round. The man's Kevlar-clad body hung like a limp doll, crushed by the weight of metal. A resounding dong made me jump, as though someone had just thumped the gong in frustration. The memory of that giant's implacable gaze reminded me not to hang around to find out. Feet pounding, I rounded a corner, bruising my shoulder on a wall as my footing slipped, and caught sight of my quarry once again. He wasn't running, but sitting on a railing as though he had all the time in the world. He even waved when he saw me, flashing me a jaunty salute with that infernal discus. I almost grinned back, catching myself just in time. It was like a game to him, and his playfulness was infectious. Then he simply let go of the railing and toppled backwards, dropping the 4 stories to the ground. Who was this guy? I don't know, but I like him. I took the stairs 4 at a time. Through the gaps in the balustrades, I could see him calmly stand, brush himself off, and turn to watch my progress. I was still 2 stories up when he bolted. Desperation clutched at my guts, and I all but flew down the last staircase, leaping the final railing in my haste to reach the ground. The floor was so highly polished that I slipped and fell, losing precious seconds. Almost crying with relief, I made it to the end of the corridor and burst through into a rain-soaked alleyway, into the embrace of cold night air. The alleyway seemed deserted, apart from a verminous rustle from a nearby dumpster. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the Parisian night, and everything to do with the stranger's body spread eagle on the concrete. He lay on his front, his sleeve darkening where it rested in a puddle. Thunder grumbled overhead, and seconds later the rain started. Heavy, invasive drops that drowned out the murmur of distant traffic on the Rue de Rivoli. We had emerged into some sort of service entrance, a drop-off point for deliveries, perhaps. It wouldn't take long for the mercenaries to figure out where we'd gone. I bit my lip and inched closer. The man was disturbingly still. If it was a bluff to get my attention, he was a damn fine actor. The painting. Reaching with tentative fingers, I crouched over his prone body. There was a painting-sized lump protruding from a baggy trouser pocket. If I could just... The rapid footsteps caught me off guard as something heavy impacted the base of my skull. The nausea almost made me vomit, and I felt my head lolling. Damn it.
In Episode 8 of Tomb Raider, The Angel of Darkness, Lara Croft was played by J.R. Millward, and the mysterious stalker was played by Adam Coover. Written and adapted by J.R. Millward. Based on an original story by A. Murty Schofield. With music by Peter Connolly and Martin Iverson. Additional sound effects courtesy of www.freesfx.co.uk, the BBC and the YouTube Audio Library. Produced by Stephen Millward. Lara Croft and Tomb Raider are the property of Crystal Dynamics and Square Enix.